Hello, and welcome to another edition of Critical Q&A, the show where I answer your questions based on what you have sent me by email at askchrisshelton@gmail.com or have left for me in the comments section of my Q&A videos. Hey, everybody. Boy, this has been quite a week with Danny Masterson's trial having now occurred, happening rather. This video is being recorded a couple days before I'm releasing it here on Sunday as usual. So I don't have all of the, information up to date to right now as you're watching this, as I'm doing this, if that makes sense. But boy, has it been an interesting trial so far. I'm doing a presentation in New York this week, and that's why I'm shooting this a little earlier than usual. Okay, so there is a lot to say about this trial, and I should probably do a separate podcast or videos or whatever about it. And if I didn't have this presentation to do this weekend and wasn't crunched for time, then I probably would be doing a lot more live streaming right now about the trial. So hopefully then next week I've got other things happening. So it's just been really crunch time for things, and you haven't heard from me as much as I would like you to have heard from me about this trial and what's happening. But I am doing my best to get on other people's shows and discuss it when and where I can, and get at least things out on social media about it. If you're not following me on Twitter, for example, you definitely should at Chris Shelton MSC on Twitter. All right. So we got questions, and some of them involve Scientology, of course. So let's go ahead and get to them. Michael Yoder. After listening to your podcast with Cyprian Ivanov about the Danny Masterson case and the question of the use of PC folders in court, do you think that while the church keeps all the folders, there might be a chance that they would destroy any folders to get rid of evidence that might harm the church? I would think LRH would have believed in getting rid of anything that might affect the church's credibility. Michael, thank you for this question, and of course you are spot on, so let's go ahead and talk about this. The Church of Scientology is a semi-intelligence organization. It has an intelligence division within it called the Office of Special Affairs, and basically Scientology is a data collection agency. They collect secrets, information, knowledge about their parishioners, their followers, the people who are Scientologists. They do this with numerous types of files that are kept, paper files, and they have warehouses of these files in storage going back decades. And these folders and the preservation of these folders is a whole little thing in Scientology, and that's a very important thing. So what are these folders? Well, there's what's called a pre-clear folder, or a PC folder, and this is your confessional folder. This is the information that you give up or give over to a Scientology auditor in auditing sessions. Auditing consists of confessionals or security checks where you are divulging your secrets, as well as counseling or trauma sort of focused sessions, which are trying to deal with past traumas and pains and problems you've had and things like that. All of that is written down, all the contents of what you say and talk about in those counseling auditing sessions. And I use the word counseling very loosely here. I really only use it to give you guys some concept of a comparison or an analogy to auditing. Auditing really isn't counseling. It is auditing. It's its own thing, and it's quite destructive to your mental health and well-being. But I have to use the word counseling because an auditor sort of fills the role of a counselor, kind of, and that's the best analogy to use for it. It's really not accurate in the same way that saying Scientology is a church. It's, it's contentious. There's debate to be had there. Anyway, regardless of any of that, there is this thing called auditing. It does happen. You do divulge secrets in it, and those secrets are written down. And these are kept preserved in folders, and those folders are kept preserved in closets or warehouses, and there are tons and tons of these things. When I was in Scientology for as many years as I was, and as far as I got in the auditing that I received, I had something on the order of 50 to 60 folders, just piles of them. If you were to put them all together in a room. And many, many Scientologists have that many or more. I've seen some Scientologists who have well over 100 PC folders. And that's all their secrets and everything, right? Divulged and written down. You also have ethics files, and those are separate from the pre-clear folders. And any matters having to do with right, wrong, good, bad, your conduct as a Scientologist and your choices in life, whether you have taken drugs, which Scientology is against, or have done other bad, harmful misdeeds in some fashion or another, especially having to do with any sort of criticism or countering the goals or purposes of Scientology, or getting in the way of that, or breaking its rules. All of that is documented in reports, and reports are written in Scientology by everybody. Everybody writes reports on everybody else. It's a snitch culture. So you have a lot of reports, and these reports are generally referred to as knowledge reports. I am writing a report about knowledge I have, and here's my knowledge report, or my KR. And these are turned into the local church ethics officers. These are actual people that's an actual job in Scientology, is to be a moral cop. And that's what an ethics officer is. And it's not just, shaking their finger at people who break the rules. They have a whole series of steps and disciplinary actions they can take against Scientologists in order to keep them in line. And Scientologists agree with this discipline, and they call it the Scientology justice system. And there's a lot of steps to it and a lot of different actions that can happen, and all of them centered and focused around the fact that Scientology is right and you in your misdeeds and misconduct are wrong, and Scientology is going to discipline and correct you so that you get on the right path, all in the direction of getting auditing so you can go up the levels of Scientology and achieve personal spiritual freedom and immortality. That's the PR line. That's why you go along with all of this nonsense. But it is extremely controlling and very dictatorial. It's a very authoritarian system. It is, you follow what we tell you to do or you're out of here. And those reports form the basis of an awful lot of judgment and actions that can happen against Scientologists, because they report on each other, or Scientology staff or Sea Org members will write reports on Scientologists. I was going to say parishioners. I hate using the religious terminology, but anyway, this sort of thing happens, and those files are another set of folders that are permanently kept on each Scientologist. Most Scientologists have numerous ethics files because numerous reports get written on them over time by various Scientologists. And so this whole network of reporting, these folders, these files are kept by these ethics officers, and they're gone through and they're indexed and they're kept up to date, and they are summarized, and this information is utilized. It's not just something that sits on the back burner and never gets talked about or looked at. And often there are incredibly personal details put in these reports by Scientologists against one another. Intimate sexual details, details of criminal activities or rule breaking, financial shenanigans, all kinds of stuff gets reported on. All of this, the pre-clear folders and the ethics files, and these are just two of the different kinds of reports and files that are kept on people in Scientology. There are other ones, which I'm not going to go into today. These are the two main ones I want to focus on, is this PC folders and ethics files. And that's where most of the naughty secrets and personal details that people don't want known, that's where you'll tend to find them. I mean, they have student files with a record of your student progress, and they have a central files with your correspondence with the organization and copies of invoices of services you've taken. But that's not, those are really administrative type files. These ethics and PC folders are kind of where all the goods are. And so these are religiously privileged files. They are not subpoenable or gettable by the courts. They are protected. And I happen to have certain levels of disagreement with that. I understand that you want to, in a religious setting, be able to have a safe, confidential environment in which you can divulge your secrets. But when it comes to being accused of criminal activity like Danny Masterson, and let's get to his case now, and sexual assault against women, I don't feel that that religious privilege is really warranted when it comes to protecting people who are accused of criminal activities. If they didn't do anything, and there's no record of them doing anything, then there's nothing in the files to worry about. But if they did do something, right, then it's all there. Now, there are probably Fifth Amendment issues as well in terms of self-incrimination and stuff, and there might be legal issues and difficulties around all of that. I am not a lawyer, and as you guys know, I have been very frustrated with the law when it comes to getting justice for criminals who use religious cloaking or protection or privilege to hide their crimes. I really have a problem with that. And so there's this push-pull on this issue for me that is difficult. It's difficult for me to think through this and agree that religious privilege is just really sacrosanct thing that we should have. Yet on the other hand, I know that you can abuse it in the other direction too. But regardless of any of that, these files are not admissible in courts. They're not something that we're ever going to see in the courtroom or be used against Danny Masterson or anything like that. It's been made crystal clear by in my podcast with Cyprian and in other places that that is very, very difficult, if not, well nigh impossible to get access to those files. And yet, a lot of the information you're going to want when it comes to criminal activities on the part of Scientologists is contained in those files. So the question becomes now, can the church or will the church destroy these files to get rid of evidence? And we know for a fact that they do. We saw this, Marty Rathbun, before he turned traitor and went back to Scientology, confessed to having shredded and gotten rid of evidence in the Lisa McPherson case. He blatantly said, I got rid of and destroyed evidence that would have incriminated the Church of Scientology and maybe even David Miscavige personally in the death of Lisa McPherson, because she died wrongfully in Scientology's hands under their care. And that was 1,000% Scientology's fault. And David Miscavige got, frankly, blood on his hands because of that. True. Absolutely true. It's not even a controversial statement to me to say that. Are there other instances of that? Of course there are. These are documented. There have been ex-Scientologists who have talked at length about how back in the day, the Guardian's office would go through and vet files. After Hubbard was wanted for various things, files were gone through and evidence destroyed. Any evidence, for example, in the 1970s and 80s, that L. Ron Hubbard was actually running Scientology and managing its affairs, all of that evidence was deleted or erased or gotten rid of or shredded in huge shredding parties that Scientology engaged in order to cover up and protect L. Ron Hubbard, right, and cover up his crimes. This is thoroughly documented. I don't have to imagine this or wonder about it. It definitely happened. Now, as far as my own personal experience goes, I too saw documents being shredded, and I also saw documents and PC folders being vetted. And this was something that was actually very common. It was very commonplace in Scientology to have, for example, there are different levels of Scientology, and as you move up the ladder of the hierarchy of organizations, the data you become exposed to is more and more sensitive. And so if you get promoted up the line and you end up in David Miscavige's inner circle or around those, the upper regions of Scientology, your PC folder and your ethics files go with you. And then if you get demoted later to a lesser organization, which isn't supposed to have that information, or you're not supposed to be talking or giving anybody at that level that kind of information, they go through and actually with a razor blade cut out, they call it vetting the file, and they cut out any mention of certain individuals or certain activities or projects or even whole organizations, because there are secret confidential organizations that exist in Scientology. I don't even know all of them. This is something that somebody told me one time. And so these confidential things, this is very sensitive stuff. And in Scientology, you have a very controlled, what we call siloing of information, compartmentalization, right? This person knows this person knows this, but they never talk. Or this person knows this, and this person knows this, and David Miscavige knows all of it, but they don't know all of it. They only know their little bits and pieces. And yet, security and security consciousness in Scientology is taken very, very seriously. And so this vetting was a regular thing, and it used to frustrate me to no end, because as somebody who oversaw and was kind of trying to take care of the quality of the technical delivery, it really bothered me, because if a person had an issue with Joe Blow and you cut out every reference to Joe Blow, then how could you deal with their issues, 2, 3, 4, 10 years later? Because every mention of Joe Blow has been cut out of their file. So you don't even know what they're talking about. And they're going to go into a session and they're going to know that that they have this sensitive information they can't tell you. And yet they're supposed to they're supposed to divulge their secrets and be willing to talk about anything with their auditor. And it's this really weird push-pull conflict that occurs within the world of Scientology's auditing / counseling stuff. And that's how I used to think about it, is I was on the side of the pre-clears, the person who was supposed to be receiving help. I wanted them to be able to say whatever they wanted to in their sessions. And, no, organizationally, that was not allowed. So that was kind of bothersome to me, even when I was in. But this vetting thing was routine and common. And so now you ask, well, will they go so far as to destroy evidence in the Masterson case? Of course they will. No question about it. Their entire history as an organization, the Church of Scientology now, and specifically the Office of Special Affairs and David Miscavige and how they choose to run things, show a repeating pattern, a consistent pattern of destroying evidence whenever it suits their needs in order to hide the truth from law enforcement. Scientology, and David Miscavige specifically, are cowards. They are criminals. And Scientology is a money-making scam. These people have legions of skeletons in their closet. And they hide those, and they hide them and hide them and hide them. And there are piles and piles of these bones hidden in these closets. And if they can go, take some dynamite and blow the closet up, absolutely they will. Now, whether they destroy all the evidence, never keep any copies anywhere, is questionable, because sometimes it's considered that maybe there are certain document dumps or areas where they have secured locations where they've got all the stuff, right? But I don't know. It seems to me that would be a pretty big liability. And Miscavige would probably really just rather have it all burned and scorched, and we don't ever have to worry about that ever again. When the knowledge only exists in the heads of people, it's very, very easy to discount and discredit them. A person, an ex-Scientologist, can come forward and say, well, I was beaten, I was abused, I was this, I was that. And David Miscavige can produce 20 affidavits from loyal Scientologists who will swear on any number of Dianetics books that never happened. And that person who's claiming that David Miscavige abused them or Scientology abused them or whatever are just lying. And yet the unbelievable truth is that David Miscavige got 20 people to lie for him and swear under oath that their lies are true. That's the power of coercive control and undue influence that exists in Scientology. That's why these groups are so destructive. They literally destroy a person's entire sense of honor and integrity. And a Scientologist, I can tell you from my own personal experience and having spoken with, many, many, many other ex-Scientologists, and the interviews are all over my channel for you to see, that they park their morals and their conscience on the side when it comes to matters of Scientology. If it's good for the church, it's good, period. And it does not matter how many people are destroyed in the process, how many lives are ruined, how much bankruptcy has to happen, how many people have to be walked all over and destroyed, as long as Scientology lasts. And the exact analogy for this, the comparison that almost anybody can look at and understand as the exact same thing, is what was exposed with the Catholic Church and pedophile priests, a problem that persists to this day because the Catholic Church really has not yet fully taken responsibility for and come clean on its incredibly long history of crimes and covering up those crimes and protecting those pedophiles. And that's exactly the same situation as we see with what Scientology does and is capable of doing. So it's awful both ways, and that's my long answer to your short question, Michael. Thanks for asking. Steve from Australia. I'm just curious if you've seen Jesse Prince's open letter to Leah on his Facebook page. I'd love to hear your thoughts. On one hand, I do understand why he has trust issues with Mike, given the fair game he received during his time with the Lisa McPherson Trust. But I do have to say I'm a little concerned for Jesse's mental well-being, given some of the stuff he brought up. Just seems so out of character for him. All right, Steve, thank you for this question. And yeah, drama. Don't we love conflict? I removed myself from social media and from the drama of the ex-Scientology and ex-cult world very purposefully a few years ago, and I don't get involved in personal conflicts between people as much as I can avoid it, because it is so noisy and contentious, and just it never results in any sort of good outcome. People just get pissed at each other, and they have sometimes justifiable grievances, and sometimes they just have trauma and they're just talking out of it. And I'm not judging or going to judge Jesse Prince or his mental condition. The man said what he said. I disagree with him. I don't think that you have to be I interviewed Jesse, by the way, years ago on my channel. He published a book called Expert Witness. And according to his post, he considers himself one of the only real experts who's qualified to talk about Scientology in any way. And of course, I find that absolutely ridiculous. That's not true at all. And you do not have to be highly trained as an administrator or as an auditor in Scientology in order to comment on its abuses. The women who are currently on trial, bringing charges against Masterson, are not trained expert administrative Scientologists, but they can certainly speak quite candidly and openly about the abuses of Scientology and that they suffered. And Jesse Prince is off the rails in saying otherwise, or thinking that, you have to be some highly expert Scientologist in order to talk about it or be taken seriously by the major media. And I have no idea where he's coming from with that, but I could not disagree more. There is a great deal of difficulty in this field specifically. This is one of the specific problems in the ex-cult world, or in the coercion world, with people who are both victimized and then become victimizers. And that happens in cults. Perfectly good people with good moral foundations and a good, set of ideals and who have good intent, can become absolute monsters because of extremist beliefs and the need and necessity that they feel to protect their group, protect their fellows, and push forward their ideals as they see according to the group. And the thing about destructive cults like Scientology is that they are deceptive. They lie to these well-intentioned people, and they tell them things like, in order for L. Ron Hubbard to be protected, or in order for the church to be protected, you have to go out and say this and do this and be an activist, or take a stand, or say these things or do these things. And sometimes the things that they are directed to say and do are covert things. It's necessary to protect us that you go do this very secret bad thing, like kill a judge's dog, or stalk and harass some people, or follow this person around, or go through their trash, or hire private investigators to do all that dirty work, because we don't want to get our hands dirty doing it, but we want that dirty work done. And this kind of shadow work, this intelligence work, this faux, spy stuff that Scientology gets up to, and other destructive cults do too, and as well as overt violence, blatant calls for physical violence and that kind of thing that sometimes happens in these groups. All of it thoroughly justified by the fact that they're the good guys, and these bad things we have to do are just necessary in order for us to survive and defend ourselves. And, you can frame this stuff and spin it all day long to make yourself out to be the good guy and make everybody else out to be the bad guy. And when you go into a headspace like that, you end up doing and thinking some very dark things. I've been there, done that. And I didn't even go all the way down that rabbit hole the way people like Mike Rinder, Marty Rathbun, Jesse Prince did. These are people who did very, very bad things to other people in the name of Scientology. They got to live with that, because you go all the way down that rabbit hole of extremist belief and ideas and radicalized kind of violence, and then you wake up and you go, holy shit, what the hell am I part of? What am I doing? This is crazy. I shouldn't be part of this. I shouldn't be doing this. I'm a bad person. Oh God, what's happened to me, right? And you go, wow, and you turn the page. You turn, you go, whoa, I need to stop doing this, and you change your life. You stop victimizing people. You try to make up for what you did. You try to realize the full extent and consequences of what you did. That's all part of that recovery process. Some people go through that process, some people don't. And to whatever degree a person can really embrace and do the work necessary to take responsibility for their past misdeeds, own up to it, and accept the consequences of that. That's what we call recovery. That's a big part of the whole recovery process, is owning what you did. And I believe Mike's done as much as he possibly can in order to try to put that out there, apologize for what he's done, make personal contact. It's generally not some big public platform kind of activity. It's something you got to do one-on-one. You got to reach out to people you hurt. You got to apologize to them. You have to have the talk. You got to do that work. And I've done that work. Other people have done that work. And even doing all that isn't necessarily going to satisfy everybody. Some people have big chips on their shoulders, and they've got, they're so big that's like an albatross around their neck. If you know that old rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, right? They can't ever let it go. They can't get rid of it. Even when they are trying to, they can't get rid of it. They need some therapy or some help or some counseling or something, some real help. And I'm making no implication there about any one specific person. I'm talking in general terms right now. I'm not, this is not my commentary on Jesse or Mike or their state of mind. This is my commentary on the more general problem of this, and the fact that it is hard. It's hard to do the recovery. It's hard to be accepted for the recovery. It's hard to make up the damage for what you have done in the past. It's a struggle, and every single individual ex-cult member has to come to terms with this for themselves and has to learn how to live with themselves and deal with that. And to the degree that they are a Mike Rinder or a Jesse Prince, right, they've got maybe a lot more to deal with than your common, ordinary ex-Scientologist who just existed at the public level or was only a staff member for a couple years or something and didn't really get up to that much. Maybe they, got a little abusive with some Scientologists. Maybe they, got a little mean-spirited here and there, but nothing on the order of going out and trying to ruin somebody's life because they're anti-Scientology. I mean, that's the kind of thing Mike Rinder got up to. And he owns that. And I don't know what else to say about it, if Jesse Prince or somebody else wants to go write a book, go on a media tour, do all the work that Mike has done, put Emmy Award-winning documentaries together, please do. Go for it. Nobody's stopping you from doing that. But this, this sort of pot shots from the sidelines, and the idea that you're somehow a better ex-Scientologist than somebody like Mike because you know more. I mean, Jesse, shut the fuck up, man. What are you talking about? It's just so incredibly dumb. So that's my take on it. I know probably just contributing to the drama saying, what I'm saying right now, but I just don't really have any time or attention for that kind of nonsense. The real target is Scientology and the cults out there. Those are the bad guys. Those are the things that we need to be directing our attention to, not the infighting and trying to pull each other down over jealousy or trauma or nonsense or whatever. And who knows what the motivations are here. But, in general, I've seen all of those things motivating people to try to tear down Leah, Mike, me, Aaron, Tony, Karen, Tori. You just see this. You see this over and over again through the years. Various people poke their heads up and have nothing to say that's really of any use whatsoever. They're just catcalling. And then they disappear for a while again, and in the end of the day, none of that really matters. And that's my brutally honest take on all of that. I hope that was useful in some fashion. Felicity K. The more I learn about cults and other coercive groups, the more obvious it is that the leaders appear to operate from the same playbook. Do you think the majority of cult leaders actually study techniques of coercive control, or do these practices come naturally to them because of whatever pathology they may have? To the average person who is not a sociopath, it seems totally alien that someone would instinctively know how to methodically break down their followers. Is it more likely that such an individual admires other cult leaders and seeks to emulate them by learning how they exerted control? Felicity is a great question because the truth is it's all of the above. It's not an either-or situation. People like Jim Jones, people like Adolf Hitler would practice and study and look at other leaders and how they acted, how they gathered crowds, how they moved people on the emotional scale or spectrum. And they would study that quite closely, and they would use that and practice that in their own work. I think Jim Jones was also somebody who, if I remember this right, studied or followed, preachers or Christian ministers, right? This kind of thing. Wanted to learn how do you do this? And you learn various techniques. Now, this is not something that you have to go study, though, because if you grow up a sociopath, if you grow up in this mindset where you don't really empathize with other people the same way others do, if you find yourself sort of the odd man out all the time, you realize as a young person probably that, oh, you're different and you're not really thinking and acting and feeling the same way other people are. And if you lack empathy, you are a person who is willing to and able, even as a child, to start experimenting on other people. And we see this kind of thing with serial killers who become fascinated by death or by dying or by, how life lives and dies. And they experiment on animals and things like this before they move up to humans. We can analogize that to how people learn how to be cult leaders. They're not dissecting people, but they're dissecting them emotionally. In terms of how do you manipulate people. If I lie to this guy about, if I lie to Joe about Bill, and then I go over and I lie to Bill about Joe, I can sit back and watch the fun as Joe and Bill tear each other's heads off. Isn't this interesting? And then if I go lie to Sue and I lie to Sally about each other, and I just sit back and watch them tear each other's heads off, isn't this interesting? Wow, this is fun. Maybe I could try this and this. And you see what I mean? They just work out and try and experiment with manipulation tactics. And sometimes they succeed and sometimes they fail. And where they have some degree of intelligence or cunning or cleverness, then they evolve over time. And by the time they're teenagers, you might find a whole framework of control that they have worked out with their family or with their quote unquote friends who really are only friends in name only, but the friends don't know that, you know. These are manipulators. These are predators. And we don't have to assign or use psychiatric designations to talk about them because this is just predatory behavior. If you and predator is an advisedly used word in this case. These are human beings who prey on other human beings. They don't look at other people as other people. They don't look at them as equals. They don't look at them as with compassion or tolerance or understanding or support or love. They look at them as prey, as people to be victimized, as people to be taken advantage of, as rubes, dupes, idiots, morons, right? People who are lesser than the cult leader, sociopath, predator. So it can evolve quite naturally, and they have years and years to perfect their skills. And sure, they can go study, they can watch, they can learn. You know, if you become a student of human behavior, and many, many, many cult leaders are, then it's not hard to learn rather quickly that there are only so many things that affect and manipulate people. You know, you learn very quickly to isolate people, manipulate them through lies, deception, right? Playing with their moral foundations, playing with their emotions. You learn very quickly that it's not hard to mess with people. Little bit of gaslighting, little bit of lies, little bit of deception, a little bit of moving things around even. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you can screw with a person's reality or their sense of self. And it doesn't take long to learn. So do cult leaders study other cult leaders? Of course they do. Absolutely. You will see that. But some of them also just evolve their processes perfectly, you know, completely organically. And some mix it up. Okay. And that's what you'll find out there. And I hope my answer again was a little illuminating, educational, informative, whatever, on this one. So there you go. Thanks for asking. J. Cliff 85. In rereading Jesse Prince's excellent book, Expert Witness, I was surprised that the most senior level Sea Org executives at the INT base could afford what were clearly luxury goods and actually had leisure time to enjoy them. For example, Jesse mentions that during his travels, he would buy his wife jewelry and perfumes. He collected high-end stereo gear and had a variety of music tastes. Those vinyl albums were not cheap even back then. In addition, he describes how he and other top staff took karate lessons in their time off and graduated with black belts. Norman Starkey apparently had a fully stocked wet bar in his apartment. Vicky Asnaran collected horses. You see where I'm going with this. What kind of WOG-level salary plan were those senior executives on? They must have received some pretty nice bonuses. And when did they have time to enjoy their stuff? All right, Jay Cliff. Well, you read the same book I did, and I was not at the INT base. And so Jesse's claims about all of that are Jesse's claims about them. And I believe what he had to say. And I agree that his book was quite excellent when it came to breaking all of that down. And he and I talked about all that stuff on my channel as well. So you can check out my interview with him. It was from, a few years ago. And I thought he did a great job there. So what kind of salary did they have? I don't know. I didn't used to work at RTC. I don't know. But I do know that they got bonuses. And I know that there was a lot more money being thrown around and sort of spread around back then amongst the international crew than what David Miscavige was comfortable with. And when he took over, he used money as well as sex and sexual censorship, I should say, or control, in order to oppress these people and keep it all, tamp them down and get them under control. And he did not allow people to have money or time off or fun. That was just one of the things that disappeared in the Sea Org. And this rolled downhill eventually by, in the first year I was in the Sea Org in 1995, we had a wonderful Sea Org day. We had a full day off. We went and rented a hotel. We had, great big poolside dinner catered. I mean, it was amazing. Dancing. It was one of the best days I ever had in the Sea Org was my very first Sea Org day. which is kind of a Sea Org holiday, right? It's the day the Sea Org started, and they celebrate it every year. Well, every year after that, things got worse and worse and worse. The schedule got shortened, where we went, how much money was spent on it, how much time was allocated for it, dwindled until finally, by the time I left the Sea Org Day was a joke. Maybe we would get a quarter day off. Maybe. I mean, it was just ridiculous, right? And this is David Miscavige's direct influence. Hubbard was not like this. Hubbard spread the wealth, and he did, well, spread the wealth to a degree. He believed in bonuses, and he believed in rewarding people. He didn't do it as often as he should have, but at least he believed in it. David Miscavige does not. David Miscavige hates people. He hates them. He's I don't know, yeah. There's just no other way to describe it. And so he doesn't want people around him rewarded or for them to have any sense of luxury or freedom or anything other than nose to the grindstone. You do what I tell you, and you better be doing it at triple speed or you're for it, right? And this is his whole attitude about other people. He hates them. So that's why you've seen such a rapid decline in what you might call the human resources aspect of Scientology, right? As Miscavige does not value people. He does not value good input. He doesn't value good work. He values compliance, and he values sycophantry, right? He values people sucking up to him. That's all he really wants. He's a weak coward, and that's what that personality does, is it pushes everybody else down, because David Miscavige knows that he's a tiny little man who has no real power other than the power that he can muster up to scare and intimidate other people. That's who he is. At the bottom of at the bottom of his core of being, he's a coward. And so he has to use fear and anger and intimidation to scare the hell out of everybody else around him, so they are more scared of him than he is of them, so that they will cower in terror and that sort of thing. And when you are giving people money and freedom and influence and power, they feel not afraid of you. They feel, entitled and privileged and in a position where they can fight you and they can push back against you. And David Miscavige cannot afford to have anybody in that headspace. Everybody around him has to be deathly afraid of him, or he's not doing his job. That's how he thinks about things. And so you ask me, what kind of salary, what kind of bonuses, none of that stuff exists anymore. It used to exist. We're talking decades ago. Scientology hasn't had an upper structure with any kind of privilege or influence or power in decades. David Miscavige destroyed all of that well over 20 years ago. So you're asking about basically ancient history and Scientology, and Jesse Prince described it quite well in his book. So I don't know that I have a whole lot more to add to it than that, but I thought I'd offer some commentary, and I hope it's helpful. Dr. Robert Tobias. We are living in a time when it is extremely easy to research via the internet the background and criticism of high control groups, whether they are cults or multi-level marketing schemes. Nevertheless, they seem to proliferate globally. Why is that? Thank you for this question, Dr. Robert. And what I will say is there's so many reasons that I can point to, but in trying to reduce this down to perhaps a ridiculous simplicity, let me say that the factors of cult influence and the spread of cult ideas and why do people do this or get into these groups when they should know better has everything to do with our emotional life and how unbalanced that is to our rational life. And by that, I mean that, we've developed these frontal lobes that allow us to associate with one another, build social hierarchies, and establish relationships and moral foundations and thinking and sort of sequential thinking and logical thinking and all that kind of stuff. And this is very powerful stuff. It's allowed us to take over the planet and build our civilizations and all of that. But it is nothing compared to where the power of the rational front lobes is nothing compared to the power of our emotions. Our emotions are what drive our behavior. How you feel is going to trump what you think 100% of the time. And maybe you accept that as a truth and maybe you don't. Doesn't matter to me. It is a truth. Your emotions rule your thinking and your decision making. And so we might have at our fingertips all the knowledge of the world, and we do. We have it now literally at our fingertips. There is almost no fact, no event in history, no person in history, nothing that I could not look up sitting right here with my computer. I could know almost anything from the highest level quantum physics down to, the smallest, the attendees of a kindergarten class in Roanoke. I mean, there's all of it's there somewhere if you have access to it. Do I take advantage of that and use that to make the best possible choices for my life every time I have a decision to make? Of course I don't. No, and neither do you. Right? Why not? Because we are creatures of impulse. We are creatures of habit. We are creatures of morality, our sense of right and wrong and good and bad, and we approach life through that lens. And most of our judgments and most of our decisions are based on those things, not on fresh, new, rational information we're going to look up. So first, let's just clear the boards of any idea that any of us are operating on a fully rational plane of existence. We're not. We are operating on emotion. Things make us mad. Things make us sad. Things outrage us. Things cause us regret. And all of these feelings drive how we then act. And when we are experiencing either new or old trauma that's coming to the surface, or worry or upset or concern, or we are frightened or anxious in some fashion, then a certain part of our brain kind of clicks in. It's called the fight or flight mechanism, and there's more to it, but I'm trying to be simple here. And that fight or flight mode of survival is not a thinking, rational mode of activity. And if we're feeling stressed out, worried, or anxious or upset, we're punchy. We get worried and upset. And the decision making becomes, how do I assuage? How do I tamp this down? How do I deal with this trauma? How do I make these feelings go away? And if you're offered the combination of love bombing, information, emotional manipulation, and data and authority manipulation that cults classically offer in their recruitment phase, whether it's Scientology with its personality tests and stress tests and love bombing, or whether it's Nexium with its business consulting and power of you, and we're going to make you the best possible person you could possibly be. These kind of sales pitches sound a lot more convincing to people who are in a headspace where they're freaked out, or they're upset, or they are traumatized. They're not really thinking objectively. They're thinking with their emotions. And those emotions drive their behavior. And this is why cults will flourish and will continue to flourish forever. There really isn't any getting rid of this. It's just a matter of trying to control it as best we can by educating people into their emotions. Emotional intelligence has everything to do with staying out of a cult. It's not just critical thinking with the logical fallacies and the cognitive biases and understanding how rhetoric and logic and propaganda and that stuff works. It's also understanding your emotions because they rule you. And if you don't have some degree of understanding and control of your own emotions in your emotional life, then you are going to be victimized by your own emotions. It's just kind of the state of being human involves these things. I'm not saying all of this because I want it to be this way. It's just this is the product of everything I've ever learned about people. this is how we are. And so we can be emotionally manipulated. We can be emotionally blackmailed. And our intelligence and what we know and what we can learn have nothing to do with whether we can resist or conquer that emotional manipulation. Right? It's emotional intelligence, and it's the discipline of critical thinking that's going to get you through those instances of life where people are trying to take advantage of you, and you need to be able to see that when it's happening or spot it fairly quickly afterwards, after it's happened, so you can stop it or control it. And if you don't understand yourself, you don't understand your emotional life, and you don't understand the relationship between your emotions and your rational mind, then you're going to struggle with this. And this has been the entire mission of my channel and my own recovery from day one, has been coming to understand these concepts I'm talking about right now. And I am far, far, far from a perfect example of somebody who, never lets their emotions get the better of them. There's no such person. We all have a strong, deep emotional life and core to us. All of us do. And the more we can appreciate that, acknowledge that, appreciate that, develop that, learn about that, I think the better off we'll be. But that's kind of at the heart of the problem. And I approach this from a little bit of a deeper level. I hope that answer helps. And thanks very much for asking. So there you go. All right, let's do some flash answers. Emily C. Pretty much every Scientologist says that Scientology is the fastest growing religion in the world, but we all know that's BS. What should I say next time I hear someone say that? I'm afraid they will come up with the quote-unquote false data argument if I simply tell them that's not what Google says. I think this could be a great way to make them question their religion. Okay, Emily, thank you for this question. And what I would ask back if somebody told me that Scientology was the fastest growing religion on the planet is I'd say, oh, really? How many people were on course last night in your local church? Oh, is the place full? Are all the course rooms full? Are all the auditing rooms full? Is it just brimming over with people? Is that what's going on? That's awesome. Wow, incredible. That's so great. Questions like that. Like go to what can they see for themselves? What can they observe directly in the real world that you might use to challenge that in a friendly, confrontational way? That's how I would approach that. Lynn, do the targets of fair game by Scientologists have any protections or recourse while it is happening? Can they legally stop their harassers? Has this happened? Have any successfully seen their harassers punished by suing them or having them arrested? I'm wondering if the poor poll workers who do not have Secret Service to protect them could apply any such devices. Hey, Lynn, thanks for this question. No, there really isn't any legal recourse against fair gaming thus far. I mean, we have had a whole civil suit in the Danny Masterson situation. There's the criminal trial, but then there's also a civil suit, which was directed to try to get Danny and the church to stop. That case has gone nowhere. We saw the entire Marty Rathbun case based on the stalking and harassment of a non-Scientologist, Marty's wife, Monique, and that was derailed by Scientology. They've never been taken to task for their fair gaming in any sort of consequential way in a legal arena. This is why we must continue to use public media and popular media to expose their abuses, because the courts will do nothing. I am sorry, and I wish it was not that way, but and I'm more than happy to be proven wrong about this. So maybe I'm speaking a little from an emotional point here rather than a logical point, but you are also asking somebody who is incredibly frustrated with our legal system and the ridiculous levels of nonsense that we have to put up with in order to get organizations, hostile, destructive organizations like Scientology, out of our lives. We really don't have any legal recourse to do so because the Church of Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard and other people like him use the law, in fact, encourage in the writings of Scientology, it is encouraged to use the law to harass somebody. Hubbard says it's easy to do, and he's right. So that's a broken part of our criminal justice system. It's broken beyond repair. It needs a complete overhaul. And I'm not a legal scholar, and I don't have a legal mind, so I have no idea how or what to even begin to suggest on that. I think that we need laws on coercive control, and I think we need that concept recognized legally, because right now our legal system is kind of back in the 1800s in terms of its philosophical approach to liberties and civil problems. And there is no real psychology anywhere embedded in our legal system that allows for the fact that people can be psychologically manipulated and abused and into criminal, at a criminal level. The courts don't really recognize that. They bend over backwards to provide objective fairness, and in doing so, provide a perfect playground for cults to have their way with people's civil rights. So I wish it wasn't that way. It really bothers me that it is. And so all I can say is we've got an awful lot of work to do to fix that. Sharon, I heard someone ask you what it would take to get TC to leave Scientology. Well, I do wonder what will happen to Tom when Miscavige drops his body. Will someone else give Tom such royal treatment? Or would he be demoted to the lesser celebrity status that others like Travolta and Kirstie Alley share? Okay, I wanted to end the show here with this last thought on answering this question, which is I want you guys to start thinking about Scientology in the same way you would think about the mafia. And specifically, with a question like this, the answer is, as long as Tom Cruise is earning, and if you've ever watched mafia shows, you know that's an important word. As long as you're an earner, you're bringing in the money, right? You're paying the mafia dons and bosses, and you're bringing in the money. As long as, in other words, as long as you are of substantial material value to the organization, you're great. You're golden. You can get away with anything you want. How many people has John Travolta or Kirstie Alley gotten into Scientology lately? No one. No one's listening to John Travolta anymore. Nobody's listening to Kirstie Alley anymore. In fact, Kirstie Alley has just gone completely off the reservation. She's somebody people openly, blatantly ridicule now. She's gone so far off the reservation. John Travolta is pretty much a non-person at this point in terms of celebrity status and that kind of thing. Tom Cruise, on the other hand, just produced a movie that produced more money than any other movie in history. This guy's bringing in money hand over fist, and he does still bring in Scientologists because people still listen to him. It's insane. Not as many people as used to listen to Tom Cruise still listen to him, but there are plenty of celebrity worshipers out there who think Tom Cruise walks on water. And as long as that's the case, he will continue to be the VIP of Scientology, and any leader of Scientology, Miscavige or otherwise, will treat him that way. And the second he ain't earning anymore, and he's not the top dog, and he's not producing for Scientology, then he will be relegated to the second tier, third tier, and out the way he goes. That's how Scientology thinks and operates, is who are the earners. And that's why I want you to think about this in the same terms you would think about the mafia, right? As long as you're bringing in the money, you're good. All right, and that was our show for this week. Thank you very much for coming around, listening to me prattle on here about all of this. I hope my answers were, again, educational, informative, and entertaining, and I hope also that you will consider supporting the channel. I also want to put out here for all of you that I am available for personal consultation, whether you have family, friends, or yourself are dealing with some kind of occultic situation or coercive control situation that you want help with or advice about. I am not a licensed therapist or counselor, and I will not give you therapy, but I can give you advice and direction from my education and experience. And I am more than happy to do so. And I have helped a number of people already as a professional consultant. And so I want you guys to know I am here for you. So you can contact me through my website or through my email at askchrisshelton@gmail.com. and we can get in touch about that. All right, guys, I will see you next week. Bye-bye.